Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're back with a faction focus for Corregidor and N5. Corregidor are a faction that are very near and dear to my heart. They're the faction I started playing the game with, and they're a faction I think that even though they're considered sort of the red-headed stepchild of the Nomad sectorials, have a very unique play style, and are a very cool faction to pick up and play and cut your teeth with as well. They're sort of a high C, low B tier faction. They're a faction that won't let you down, so to speak, but one that's not necessarily doing you any favors as well. But what you get in return for sort of not having that plug and play style is a faction that has some very interesting ways of engaging with the game and engaging with your opponent. So, what defines Corregidor? Corregidor's got the most effective turn zero hacking network in the Masai Morans, who are mine layer repeater units with shotguns, specialists, for a very low point cost of about 17 points. Morans have been foundational to Corregidor for at least as long as I've been playing them, and a lot of the Corregidor units kind of formed the core of what used to be the list in kind of the vanilla N4 Nomad cast, and a large part of that is the Masai Morans. We've seen a few factions kind of get more of an ability to put out that turn zero hacking net, looking at things like White Banner with the Guilang mine layers, or Bakunin with the observance mine laying repeaters as well, but they've never really been kind of on the cusp of great, always sort of being a bit of a sideways route to go through, where they either cost too much or just didn't really fit into the style that faction wanted to play, where Morans are very different. They're a really, really good turn zero hacking network, partially because they bring something other than just that repeater. They bring a Quasi Koala, they bring a specialist to the table, and are very foundational to what Corregidor wants to do. Corregidor really excels in a rock, paper, scissors style of engagement. They probably use vision control aggressively the best out of the Nomad sectorials. You're using your white noise to, shoot enemy MSV units. And that's true for all the Nomad sectorials where you've got really good access to Hacking Device Plus. But where Corregidor stands out is also having very good aggressive MSV2, which isn't necessarily true for most of the other factions. You probably get closest with Tunguska, with the Grenzer MSV1, but a dodging opponent with a decent dodge can still give you a little bit of a headache there. In addition to that sort of vision control centric style of engaging, you've also got some of the best drop troops in Nomads and kind of, dare I say, generally in the game. And you've also got some of the really good warbands in the game, heavy warbands who can get up there and really do a lot of damage. In addition to that, you've got really good pitcher access. You've got a good, network just in those Morans, but for aggressive hacking, you've also got really good ways to get pitchers up there and start hacking. So essentially, with Corregidor, you've always got a way to engage an opponent in the way that's going to work best for you and is really going to, not turn out great for your opponent, as you hope any engagement would. But the style of engagement means that you likely have a tool for whatever you need to come across. And it also means that it takes someone to slap Corregidor pretty hard for them not to have a single route to get back in the game or put something down and engage successfully. So even though Corregidor, look, it's not giving a lot, it is giving you a lot of ways to engage with your opponent, stay in the game, have a game with attack vectors that your opponent might not expect, that even you might not expect piloting the list before you have a eureka moment. But it's a really great faction for that. And that sort of marries in with having very strong solo pieces that define your ability to engage. Like I mentioned before, and if we look over to defining units, we can see the Intruders as those MSV2 shooters. They're just on their own, no link team. Same with McMorrow as one of the heavy warbands. He's just on his own, running his game. And then all of your drop troops, your Hellcats, your Tomcats, Carlaua, all these guys are solo units who are able to drop in and make a really big impact. So, that's sort of what makes Corregidor good, but why are they maybe not so far up there? Part of it is you've got a lot of pressure on your Swick. Uh, Being a nomad sectorial and being a hacking faction, a lot of the time, if you're taking both Morans, which you probably should be, because the faction's sort of balanced around the Morans. If you're taking two Morans and two hackers, you've already spent two Swick. If you want a missile bot on top of that, you're looking at already taking up 3.5 Swick. And then you've got some unique points like some of your lieutenants costing you Swick as well. So your Swick tends to evaporate pretty quickly. And also, for as great as your individual units are, being a sectorial, your link teams kind of suck. We'll explore this more when we get into, uh, the army builder as a whole. But there are a number of little pain points in the Corregidor fire teams that, despite being kind of very small, have a really big impact on how you build your link teams and your general link team availability as well. So there have been some notable changes from N4 to N5 that have changed a bit about how Corregidor functions. The first one is marksmanship no longer being able to shoot through white noise. A lot of what you do is you could play a very remote heavy game plan with Corregidor, where you would get your Cyclone, put marksmanship on it, and then throw white noise in front of it, and just evaporate any MSV arrow pieces you got your eyes on. That's no longer the case, but heavy infantry has become a lot more popular due to the points drop. So this means that having that turn zero repeater net is better than ever. We're generally seeing more heavy infantry fielded. That means more targets for your hacking, and it also means your Morans are a lot more of a pain because suddenly it's not, your opponent taking mostly light infantry. Sometimes it's fairly balanced, or the main attack pieces are that HI. You're looking pretty good. Now, reactive guided play is notably worse. Uh, Spotlight isn't an automatic success anymore. Your opponent gets a save, and the active and reactive guided play can both suffer from bad matchups. If you're against something with, a really heavy BTS, it can actually be a struggle to try and crack through that. And then if they're getting a reset as that missile comes down, it can become very inefficient. Now, I think in N4 Corregidor, you really did want that guided missile every time. And I'm not sure that that's the same now with N5 Corregidor, because you do have ways to do what a missile does, in a sense, where a missile can reach out very far with, less orders than it takes to cross the board and have a devastating impact. I think with Corregidor, you've got some drop troops who sort of fill that same role and who can do a little more. And I don't think many people are just walking into spotlights or are doing so without a plan. So I don't know that a guided missile launcher is necessary in today's Corregidor. And I think part of that is due to, one, how those guided missiles have changed, and two, how Corregidor kind of already has the elements that a guided missile is getting you. That being said, Corregidor are still very, very good for guided play. They've got some of the most reliable ways to get repeaters wherever you want them. Part of that's in pictures, part of that's in deployable repeaters as well, and part of that's even in just the repeaters on your units. Uh, your lieutenants have gotten significantly better, and this was a really big pain point in N4. And we'll kind of explore that more as we go, and I might explain a bit of the history of that there. But yeah, your link teams have also gotten worse, and hey, we'll get to that and explain that very shortly. So let's look at the structure of a Corregidor list. Usually, what you'll be looking at is a balance really centered around your irregular and off the table orders, because your list can really only support so much of that before they run out of juice. So generally 2 is the safe number. If you've got, say, McMurrow and a Hellcat, that's a pretty safe number. You're sort of sucking yourself 2 orders, but that's okay. 3 is pushing it. Let's say you're taking a Bandit, a Hellcat, and a Tomcat. That's going to really start, bringing a noticeable impact on your order pool and your command tokens. And 4 is just probably unmanageable. If you're taking that many irregulars and off the table orders, that's going to become a big struggle really quickly. So essentially, with these irregular orders, you're sort of balancing your list around how you're going to use these slots. What am I going to spend these slots on that are going to give me not quite orders? And that's a very interesting way the factions sort of balanced around. Usually, I'd say the top contenders are McMorrow, Carlaua, and Hellcats. But then Bandits are a really great pick as well. And then some of the other stuff like Tomcats, Warcores, Diablos, they sort of sit a little bit lower. In terms of your link team structures, really your only good duos are Jaguars. We'll get into Jaguars when we get to the listing, but they're sort of a regular warband, is a good way to describe them. They've got access to really good smoke, and Corregidor is one of the few places you can get very easy linked smoke in Nomads. And also things like Panzerfaust's, very disposable arrow pieces. So little Jaguar duos, really great addition to any Corregidor list. Your Haris team is usually being used to buff up a pitcher in some way. Just trying to get that special die on a pitcher or a gun that could use the extra burst. Again, you've kind of got to focus on your solo pieces in Corregidor. So these Haris teams are really to be adding dice to some kind of utility. Whether that's pitchers, whether that's an ARO piece, whether that's a gun that just needs to get over the line, that's more what you're using it for. So you really don't tend to see cores that often. Full 4 or 5 man teams, you don't see them that often. One place you'll see them is taking a core of Jaguars, where you'll take 4 Jaguars and then something else. Again, usually a pitcher model. Or if you're taking an Aguasil Lieutenant, you might just have that core where you have, Lieutenant, Decoy, Gun piece, and then Support piece. That's the kind of other area where you'll end up having a core. So, in terms of these solo pieces, you're always going to have those 2 Morans. They're great defensively, and they're sort of what your faction is balanced around, like I said earlier. So you want those 2 Morans. You've got, Intruders as well, kind of as solo pieces that aren't taking up those irregular and off-the-table slots. And then you've got access to some pretty decent tags as well. So I think without further ado, let's hop into Army and take a look at those fireteam charts. Alright everybody, and here we are with the Corregidor fireteam chart in the Army Builder. So like any sectorial, you've got unlimited duos, you've got 1 Haris and 1 core, and really when you're looking at the Corregidor fireteam, you're really just sort of looking at these 2 top ones here that are going to form the basis of most of your fireteams. So up here we've got the Corregidor fireteam, and this is your most flexible fireteam in terms of who can form it, who can be in it. But important to note, it can only be a Haris or core. So in here you can have Aguasils, your line troop, a number of sort of mid-tier guns and support troops, Brigada is your HI, and then Lobos as well, who importantly have the Aguasil tag. And you'll notice generally sort of looking, nothing here really has these keywords that are going to be giving out purity. Then you go down to the correctional fire teams. These ones can duo, which is pretty nice, but you've got a duo Haris and a core. You've got the Lobo and the Diablo with the correctional tag, and then the poor Jaguar sort of left out on his own. So these link teams here, this is where you're getting your duos from, really, and realistically, it's usually just Jaguars. But then Lobos and Diablos sort of offer a very different style of Corregidor fireteam, which is a lot of fun and opens up different ways to build Corregidor, especially if you're taking a tag or something like that. But we'll get into that later, where Lobos have fireteam master for Diablos, who are very cheap. Now going down a bit, we've got the Geckos fireteam, who are the famous Haris teaming tags. Now these guys getting Haris bonuses, a lot harder than an N4, because you need to take 2 Geckos, or you need to take 2 Dakaris or a Daktari and Lupe who've got that Aguasil tag. Now, Gecko duos, they're playable. I don't know if they're going to win a tournament, but they do have their uses, and they are playable. And you can see a Wildcat can sort of link in here as well, which is cool. But then you've got the armored fire teams, where you've got all of your tags here, who can mix and mash together. And aside from the Gecko duo, you can actually run pretty good, tag duos with a Gator and a Gecko, serving to kind of cover each other's bands pretty well. Or a Wildcat, but I would sort of steer clear of the Wildcat in this team, but we'll get to that later. So wild cards. This is really what Corregidor used to be known for, was having a huge amount of wild cards. They sort of had, I guess, the modern wild card selection that most armies do now. Before that was really a thing, but that's not really as much of the case anymore. But we've got some very important wild cards anyway. The Cyclone and the Vostok are two pretty important guns in the faction, and the Dakaris being doctors, having that Aguasil tag, is really nice and really important. You do have a fair amount of higher armor, one wound troops, and things with no wound incapacitation that are really going to appreciate a true doctor. And we've seen paramedics sort of plummet in popularity as the way the medkit has reacted with these special die has sort of, I don't know, not taken things in their favor. Senor Massacre, another really good piece just to slap on the end of a duo you like here that just needs a third member. Senor Massacre is great for that. Valyria Grandma's very important piece. Lupe Balboa, good piece with that Aguasil tag as well, and then Jazz, who's nothing short of defining. But look, we'll get to these pieces. Let's take a look at who's who in the zoo. So your line troop is the Corregidor Aguasiles, and you're really only going to take two of these profiles. They're very, very line troop, but not like the cool line troop, like the line troop you actually kind of don't want to take. They're only BS 11, so their maximum they're going to be at shooting is 12, which isn't good, no mods. They don't have a particularly high willpower. They don't have anything extra in terms of skills, and really nothing special in terms of what they can bring to the table. Now, the common one you're going to see is the Lieutenant, which costs you half a swick. It used to be one swick, so this is actually a lot better. But you've got your Aguasil Lieutenant, and your regular Aguasil, kind of as the decoy, as one of your primary lieutenants. Now, you might be looking at this going, okay, but do you not have any better lieutenants? And the answer is kind of no. So your other lieutenant option is the Wildcat over here, who just regular profile, combi, light flamethrower, 21 points, has a lot of this other stuff, but really, you can't really bluff him as... It's hard to bluff the lieutenant. So if you're taking a Wildcat lieutenant, just vanilla Wildcat, anyone with any knowledge of Corregidor is going to go, okay, that's your lieutenant. That's like 100% your lieutenant. To try and bluff a Wildcat lieutenant, you'd have to do something like take the Wildcat and then take just a vanilla Aguasil somewhere else in the list, and that's pretty awkward as well. So the Wildcat lieutenant, it's not one that you really ever take just because of how awkwardly it fits in the faction. But then the last lieutenant you have, which is, I think, kind of erring towards the correct one these days, is one of the mobile Brigada lieutenants. You've got this really nice multi-rifle Tinbot Neg 6 profile that synergizes really well with a lot of what else the faction wants to do. And then just this cheaper boarding shotgun, which, still, we'll get to mobile Brigada later, but they're good units. They're quite good units. But the problem is with taking a Brigada lieutenant, suddenly you're very heavily incentivized to take some kind of gun Brigada, because these guys are doing their job, chilling out. You're kind of taking them. They don't have a keyword with anyone else. So you really want to take that second Brigada to get something out of taking this first Brigada. So if you're not wanting to take two Brigadas, you're really looking at the Corregidor Aguasil. And, mind you, we'll get to Brigada later. They're really quite good. But if that's not the direction your list is going, that's where the Corregidor Aguasil comes in, and where you're looking at taking that lieutenant, taking that decoy, having that support in a gun piece, making a little core, everyone's happy. So that's the Aguasil. Bit of a love-hate relationship with this guy. And then the hacking device, just a 15-point Whip 13 hacker. It's absolutely fine. Sometimes he fits in really well. That's cool. So the other thing to remember as well is the Aguasil, aside from the Jaguar core, it is really your only other viable core link that has purity to it. You can take your lieutenant, you can take your decoy, you can take your hacking device, you can take a Lobo, and you can take Lupe. And that's a pure 5-man link. Is it good? No, not really, but you can do it. And it's not catastrophic, like, I don't know, taking 5 Wildcats. So that's the Aguasils. Next up, the Tomcats. So the Tomcats are the first of our drop troops we're going to be discussing. And these guys are just your parachutists. So just parachutist, not combat drop parachutist, but these guys can come on from the side of the board at a point you like. And they really come in two flavors of kill and cuddle, CNC. So BS12, Whip 13, pretty nice, and they're kind of broken down into a few categories. The first ones are your Swick Tomcats, and these ones are your killers, basically. You're dropping these guys just to get in there and murder. If you don't feel like shilling out the extra cash for a Hellcat or Carlaua, these are your guys. So the first one here, Combi Light Flamethrower Panzerfaust for 0.5 Swick. This is a really good, just cheap option to chuck in at the end of a list if you haven't already exhausted your allotment. Combi Rifle Light Flamethrower is just a classic fork, and it's a really great piece to come on late in the game. Panzerfaust someone in the back, blow them up, fantastic. Other one's the Deployable Repeater, where if you can kind of wipe enough of your opponent's arrow pieces, this is one of the ways to get a repeater in your opponent's DZ without having to, use a pitcher or get that long-range pitcher downwind, which, mind you, isn't incredibly hard, but this is a really nice way to do it. And also, they've got multiple deployable repeaters in the tank. They can sort of walk around, put those down, go around, shoot flamethrower stuff. That's really great. Then you've got the specialist profiles with engineers and doctors, and you can choose to have some of the specialists come on with Zondcats, who are just little helper bots. And it's cool to note that, you can put this Tomcat engineer, right next to your opponent's DZ, and you can walk on this Zondcat on the back of your DZ if someone, needs help. In terms of kind of doing that and what they get done, they're fine. I mean, these are good if you also just want a specialist in the list as well. I'm very partial to the very cheap engineer doctor without the Zoncat. And the engineer has a nice upgrade to a multi-rifle light shotgun, which is quite good, especially with how, templates in general have generally kind of gone down a bit. There's just less of those running around. So yeah, just packing some extra heat, nothing wrong with that. And then, if you can fit in some of these on-cats, that's cool too. But when you're getting up to these, 25, 26 price ranges, really my eye starts looking towards the Hellcat and Carlaua. So with the Tomcats, I'm really gravitating towards these very cheap options, just sort of at the end of list building, or if you need to downgrade something into a Tomcat, they're really quite good. And have maintained a very classic N4 fork with the Combi Light Flamethrower, which is really nice. Now, Dakaris, we discussed these guys earlier. They actually fit in really, really well in the faction, having that Aguasil tag and a wild card as well. And like we discussed, doctors have generally gone up while paramedics have gone down quite a bit. Now, Dakaris, you're not going to take it in every list, but there are some units that really appreciate the support. Things like evaders and so on, especially if you don't want to shill out that command token for Speedball. So yeah, Dak's really good. Now, Clockmakers. These guys are fantastic and are your go-to engineer in any Nomad faction. Having the true +1 burst gizmo kit's great. Unfortunately, you can't link them in Corregidor like you can in Bakunin. That would be sweet as hell. But still, sitting around with a helper bot somewhere, supporting a TR bot while that helper goes off and does something else cool. They're fantastic. Whip 15, Gizmo Kit +1 burst. You pay the extra, but it's incredibly worth it. Now, the Raven Eye Officer, we got these guys just from one of the campaigns a little while ago, and they're fine. I mean, you take them sometimes. I think they're a lot better, say, in military orders, and of course in their home Starmada. They're a lot better there, but sometimes you just have an awkward amount of points left over. Or yeah, you're happy to just chuck in a Raven Eye. That's absolutely fine. yeah, Mind Layer, EM Mine with an Emerat, they're just really there to stop your opponent coming in your DZ, or maybe to move up and be a bit of a nightmare there. But yet they're okay, but they're very much not at the heart of the Corregidor experience. Then the Tag Treba. So these guys, if you're taking a tag, they're quite good. I found dodge +3 to actually be really handy, especially on the tags in Corregidor who do want that. Some of them are pretty decent at dodging, so that's pretty cool too. And Gizmo Kit +1 Fizz, look, it's an extra 5%, but when you're taking the Clockmaker with that Burst 2 Gizmo Kit, it's pretty nice. These guys can just sort of jump into the Corregidor Fire Team. Uh, and, don't add much there in terms of a tag or anything, but having the Gator Pilot actually be a pretty decent CC stopgap is really nice. CC attack +9, so they're swinging on a 22 with a para CC -6. That's actually pretty good. And with a boarding shotgun as well, they're a good little guy just to trail kind of at the end of your fire team if you're worried about drop troops, or kind of press forward as a guy you don't really mind losing if you decide to push up with him. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the Gator Pilot down here. Gecko Pilot's fine, but whatever. Now we get to the first really major part of most Corregidor lists, and that's Valyria Gromons. Bit of a spoiler, in most Corregidor lists, you're going to take 2 hackers, and it's going to be Valyria and it's going to be Jazz. Very simple reason for that is that she's a Whip 14 hacker with a pitcher. And pitchers, there's one more way to get them aside from Val and Jazz. But Valyria is very happy to be stuck on the end of a cool duo you like out of these guys, and then just glue on Valyria on the end of that fire team, get those burst 2 pitchers. Maybe it's a couple of evaders, maybe it's a couple of mobile brigadas, maybe it's a couple of wildcats, but you take your 2 fun fellas, stick Val on the end of that, and then she's a very big part of your game plan. She can also benefit from firewalls from the evader or the mobile brigada very easily, and she does need it. She's kind of squishy. But the one thing you'll notice, and a pattern sort of throughout a lot of these lower cost models that form the foundation of your army, is that they're very cheap. We're getting Valyria for 19 points for a Whip 14 hacker with pitchers, and then also has total control +1 burst. I've never smiled harder in my life than when I've played Corregidor and I see my opponents deploying a tag, because Val just eats that shit for breakfast. It's crazy. Total Control is an insane program. It's a program that I'll happily coordinate it order. Total Control, because of how brutal it is. But just straight up on the profile is crazy. So that's Val. You're taking her in every Corregidor list just because of those pitchers and for the high whip. And then sometimes you get that beautiful gravy of the Total Control. Next up, Carlaua, who is sort of your Rolls-Royce drop troop. We'll get to the Hellcat a little bit later, but you've kind of got a tiered system where you've kind of got Tomcats as your budget box option, Hellcats as, a very nice choice, and then Carlaua as sort of, I've got the points, let's go all in. And the reason for that with Carlaua is that parachutist deployment zone. If your opponent doesn't know about Carlaua, she can sometimes walk on and just end the game there. If your opponent hasn't deployed well enough. BS-13 with a breaker combi adhesive launcher rifle is really nice. You can sometimes just walk on and shoot a tag in the back with the adhesive launcher rifle, and just glue them and they're fucked, and that's that. Light flamethrower is really nice as well, kind of having that classic fork. And climbing plus, it's great. She's also a Whip 14 engineer. You're not really going to use her for recovery or mission stuff that often, but it will come up. And she's packing D charges for things like Mind Wipe or, looting and sabotage as well. So she fits in really well with a lot of the missions as well. You do have the 29 point just on her own, or the 33 point with Moriarty the Zondcat. So this is again another helper bot, but where I'd usually say steer away from the Tomcat helper bots, I'd say definitely take Moriarty if you can. And that's because he's got Explode. So what Moriarty can do is he can just run up to, I don't know, let's say a linked Fusilier, can just walk up to him and say, what do you want to do? And if the Fusilier says, oh, I shoot, you go, okay, that's groovy. You know, you can hit me, you're going to do 1 damage unless you crit. I'm going to blow up and kill you back. And when you've got this little taser down here, sure, it's not much, but you can really put units in a very uncomfortable position, where you can kind of send in Moriarty, you know, to kill something with a template, and then bring in Carlaua, where they've got a really good relationship in that way. Or, of course, you can send it in to go, you know, pick something up, whatever. But him having Explode is absolutely huge, and you can kind of use Moriarty to make kind of different sorts of forks in your own way as well. You can get him to engage a model, and if your opponent says, oh, you know, I'm not going to do anything because I don't want to blow up, you can happily engage. You know, you're only CC8, you miss your para-CC weapon, whatever. Then you can just spray into that engagement with Carlaua. And, you know, let's say you hit some shots on your opponent, that's great. Let's say you hit a shot or two on Moriarty, that's fine. He takes a wound, he blows up, he blows them up too. So there's a lot of very cool things you can do with Moriarty. So if you have the points, try and experiment with him if you can. My pattern tends to be, I'll just take the base Carlaua, and then at the end of list building, if I've got some points, I'll upgrade. But you can start the other way around, see how you go. Alright, Lupe Balboa is your character Aguasil, and she's a very interesting piece. I think she's a very, very interesting piece, and sort of one of the only reasons you'd want to run a pure 5-man or 4-man Aguasil core, because she's kind of got it all in a weird way. So BS12, really nice. That means she can get kind of up to that stopgap of BS13, which is sort of acceptable gunfighting. But you mix that with Mim Neg 3, and suddenly that's actually, you know, pretty decent gunfighting. And Dogged as well means that she can take a hit and keep ticking. And then you sort of get down to her loadout. Combi Rifle, Emitter, Panzerfaust, Smoke Grenade, Boarding Pistol. There's never really a range where Lupe's going to be outmatched. And I think she's actually a pretty decent ARO piece as well with that Emitter or Panzerfaust. If you're just trying to lock someone down at a long range, keep plugging that Emitter with your BS13, Mimetism, Neg 3, and Dogged. But if they get into your good range, just sling some Panzerfausts. Panzerfausts have generally gotten a lot better as well, just with how disposable interacts with that special die. So Lupe is actually a very interesting defensive unit and offensive unit as well, and just having that linked smoke. Now, it is only Fizz 11, but it's still relatively reliable compared to any unlinked smoke. You'd rather have the Fizz 11 on 2 dice than the Fizz 13 on the 1 die. And again, she's a wild card. She's a unit you can take 2 of your favorite fellas, just glue Aguasil Lupe on the back. Or if you want to get a Haris bonus on a Gecko, take a Doctor, take Lupe, glue that to the Gecko. And that's a pretty easy way to get that Gecko bonus without having to just double up on 2 useless Doctors. Because Lupe's got a bit of play to her. I don't think she's like optimal Corregidor gaming, but she's cool. But speaking of optimal Corregidor gaming, it's Jazz. Now, you know, you might occasionally leave Valyria out of a list. You're never leaving home with Jazz in the same way you're never leaving home without 2 Morans. So Jazz, she's kind of the core of your Corregidor list, and she's got 2 profiles. The first one being Jazz and Billy, where for 25 points, you get a Whip 14 Hacker, Hacking Device Plus with a +1 damage Trinity, and she's really covering all of your hacking needs. BTS 6 as well, she's usually protected by some kind of firewall, whether your opponent's going through your repeater, or if your opponent's hacking you and you're in a link team with some other friends. She's pretty survivable hacking-wise. And she brings Billy. So for, 25 points, you're getting 2 orders in this fantastic hacker. And then Billy's also really good as well. Move 6-4 repeater, he's quite fast, but his special sauce is his Flash Pulse, Heavy Pistol, and EM Mine. If an opponent comes around the corner on Billy, he's more than happy just to drop the EM Mine and, take a few hits and die. or he's happy to kind of sneak up on an opponent from behind, shoot them with a heavy pistol. I can't tell you how many strange kills I've gotten with Billy, or how many attack runs have been ended by Billy, just because people have underestimated what he can do. So Jazz and Billy, they kind of come as a little package here. Or you can take the Jazz FTO. And this is usually if you're running out of slots in your list. Depending on how you're building a Corregidor list, as we said, it is a faction that can kind of cheap out in a lot of ways. So you can end up where we've actually got more slot pressure than points pressure in some lists. So Jazz is great just if you need the slot. And also if you want another linked pitcher, Jazz is happy to play that role as well. If you want to get firewalls on top of her, that's where Jazz FTO fits in as well. So these two units, or I guess two styles of taking Jazz, they're both quite good, but you should never leave home without Jazz. Then War Cores. Generally, I'd say War Cores are a little bit below average in Corregidor compared to their average performance, just because you do have that pressure on your irregulars and drop troop slots, but they're fine. All right, Sombras. So this is where we start to get to the more expensive side of Corregidor, and Sombras really kick that off. They're a no-ending cap for deployed camo marker, which is really quite cool, and they all carry a boarding pistol, and then some kind of face-to-face weapon. So they can put out forks quite easily. They're BS-12 with Mim Neg 3, stealth, surprise attack, climbing plus as well. And really what you're looking at here is basically the killer hacking device. A weird quirk with Corregidor is that you don't have that many just straight KHDs. You've got Jazz, who you're always going to take, so you're always going to have one. But if you're looking for a second killer hacking device, that can be a bit awkward or hard to come by. You're really looking at the Sombra, a Wildcat, and we'll kind of explain the Wildcat a little bit more when we get there, or a Bandit killer hacker, who's not a great killer hacker at like 1 wound, no BTS, whip 12, and a regular. So the Bandit's very unattractive in terms of a killer hacker. So really it leaves the Sombra or the Wildcat. And I do really like the Sombra as a surprise attack killer hacker. The Sombra's also just a really good unit in missions like Capture and Protect. She's happy to go wiggle up there, sort of like a Zensha, as a HI hacker with stealth. And she's very happy to go up in things like unmasking. And yeah, generally a pretty decent unit. She's not one I'd be reaching for to start your list with. She's sort of one where, if kind of like with Jazz and Billy, if you're getting to the end of a list building, you've got a lot of points left over and you're not really sure what to spend it on, the Sombra can fit really nicely into that. What I would say is, though, they're really a sometimes food. They're definitely not an always food. And these profiles are not born equally. The Red Fury you just have no need for. Same with the regular hacking device. You've got enough good regular hackers. And the Spec Op, it's just so like blah. For 2 points, you're usually getting some kind of mission bonus with the killer hacker and a lot more synergy in your list as well. So look, not much reason to run anything else other than the killer hacker. And it's still a sometimes food, mission specific, but when it's the right time to take it, it performs really well. And now Lobos. So these kind of start exploring the correctional fire teams. And Lobos are sort of the glue behind the correctional fire team. The main thing here is the fireteam master Diablos. And we'll see if we go down to the Diablos. They're very cheap, 9 to 10 point irregular units that the Lobo can turn regular. So Lobos, they're keyworded Aguasil and correctional. And really what you're looking at here is a few profiles. You've got the Disco Baller profiles down here. You've got the Specialist Operative profiles down here. And then the NCO Red Fury Disco Baller. So again, BS13, you can get them up to BS14 in an Aguasil team, but then getting that team up the field is going to be a bit of a hassle, where you're more likely to get that going maybe in the correctional core. But then again, correctional teams don't usually reach that level of purity. But BS13, it's absolutely fine. The other thing that Lobos bring you is Berserk with Natural Born Warrior and a para-neg 9 CC weapon. It's also one of the few fire teams where you can mix Lobos and Diablos. Both have Berserk, so both can make that movement when you're going up. So usually you're going to be on 2 dice. And they're also very good at, defensively fending off. So let's talk a bit about the Disco Baller. It's a very nice piece of equipment that I think everyone's really had a chance to play with and, has realized is quite good. But if you remember from the start of the video, one thing I made very clear is that Corregidor is a faction that wants to use its vision control aggressively. And when I say aggressively, what I mean is Corregidor wants to use its vision control to get a positive gunfight in its favor. And while you can do that with smoke and white noise, you can't do that with the Disco Baller. So I think if you're taking a Lobo for the Disco Baller, you're playing a very different style of Corregidor, which you absolutely can. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think don't get excited about the Lobo just because it's got the Disco Baller, because that's not necessarily the way Corregidor wants to play. Then also, they've got relatively high armor, only 1 wound, but this is a unit that likes to be supported by the Dakaris. And you can see, you can take a Dak with the Aguasil tag and an Aguasil team with the Lobos, or if you take a Diablo and a Lobo, you can slap a Dak in there, get a specialist, and pick up the Lobo if it needs it. Yeah, and then the Lobo is also really good, pairing with a Diablo. You can then slap a Cyclone on the end of that. You've got a special die, you've got a specialist, you've got your Diablo who you're making regular, or a Vostok as well is another really good option for that. And they do appreciate a Disco Baller, especially the Vostok, just to get up the field. So that's a good place to try and fit them in. But again, they're 1 wound. They're sort of getting towards not free. But importantly, the Lobo NCO is one of only a few NCOs in the faction. So getting that extra order is actually pretty valuable. We might skip to the Diablo now, just to look at them sort of in tandem as units. And these guys are heavy warbands. So they've got 2 structure battle ravaged, but they've got Berserk as well, like we mentioned before. Natural Born Warrior CC23 with PS4 trench hammer or CC weapon, boarding pistol. So they've always got a template as well, which is really important. And then your choice between light shotgun grenades or subgun grenades. And they've got just enough fizz to where, you might be happy chucking a Specfire grenade or whatever. But yeah, look, the Diablos, these guys are quite cool. And really, really pretty brutal models. The move 6-2 on the unbattle ravaged state is really great, where you're getting that dodge plus 2 inches. So they can be moving 10 inches a turn. If you've got them in a 3-man team, that fizz is getting a bit better for that dodge as well, which is great. You're never really going to take the Flamen Spear profile, aside from maybe if you're doing coordinated order shenanigans, but even then, I don't think it's necessarily the best thing to be doing that. But yeah, you can take them in a team with Lobos to form a cheap special die basis, or you can just run them loose as well. Running 1 or 2 loose Diablos if you're not taking a missile bot is a really good way to punish a null deployment. And being this 2 wounds with, some armor and a good dodge, they can end up being a real big pain just hanging around in the midfield, dodging out at an opportune time with a template. There's a lot of play to be had with Diablos, and they're really, really great units. I guess I would say the Lobo wouldn't be really playable as it is if the Diablos weren't so good. And also just being a lucky bastard having the Aguasil tag. But I think the Lobo is a fine unit, made a lot better by the units around it and the situation it finds itself in regarding the little Aguasil tag. So next up, the Wildcats. These guys are sort of your main medium infantry next to the Lobos. And these guys come in a lot of flavors and are a mess of skills. BS13 Arm 2 BTS 6 with an MSV level 1 Combat Instinct, which is important. And number 2 for a bit of fun. And like I mentioned before, you've got that combi rifle lieutenant with kind of a vanilla Wildcat as well, that you're never really going to take. You've got your two heavy guns with the heavy rocket launcher light shotgun, 21 points and 1.5 SWIC. It's a really cheap profile, and aside from the Wildcat and one other very expensive unit we're going to get to soon, you don't have any other MSV. So the Wildcats actually fit a very important role in Corregidor, and if you're wanting a long-range MSV unit that's not going to break the bank, really it's only the Wildcat HRL that's going to do that for you. And it's a unit that's very happy to move up the board. It's got that light shotgun. It can have a team around it to support it and keep it safe. A lot going on there. And then we've got our second NCO in the faction, being the Wildcat NCO Spitfire. So overall, what's better between the Wildcat NCO Spitfire and the Lobo NCO +1 damage Red Fury, so Spitfire, is sort of up to what the rest of the list is doing. I think there is stock in having that MSV1 Spitfire. You can get some smoke on it from a nearby Jaguar from Lupe if you glue that on the end. It's not one I really go to very often. I'm much more likely to take this heavy rocket launcher being so cheap and having that better range band. Because then you're supplemented pretty well in this combi rifle range band by your specialist options. So you've got your two hackers, and these hackers are both actually very, really quite good and quite valuable. As I said before, killer hackers, you don't get a lot of them in Corregidor, so having this one's really nice. But then weirdly, this Wildcat hacking device is a great pick as well because of this combat instinct. Combat instinct means you're going to ignore stealth, and currently in the ITS rule packet, with the seasonal rules, you and your opponent both get to give a unit stealth at the start of the game if you remember to. So having a a combat instinct hacker here to make sure your enemy HI, like, I don't know, a Suijan or a Sphinx, can't just stealth by your repeaters, is really, really valuable. But like I said with the Sombra, that also puts a bit of pressure on, because suddenly you don't want to use this kind of utility cat slot on the killer hacker. You want to use it on the regular hacker because you need that combat instinct hacker. So it can create a bit of an awkward little game here between which Wildcat do I want to take, where you do want the killer hacker just because you need killer hackers. And look at BTS 6, killer hacker is really nice. You are taking a lot of defensive hacking in Corregidor as well. But then you really do want this Sixth Sense hacker. Sorry, Combat Instinct hacker. Then you've got this engineer who doesn't really fit in great. You've got other linked engineers who are probably a little bit better. And, in the fireteam charts, you can take these two support tags, but stapling a specialist to a tag isn't as important as it used to be in N4 because you've got the little helper bots. And the Corregidor tags actually do have quite good helper bots as well in terms of the old willpower. So the Wildcat Engineer doesn't really fit in anywhere great. Then you've got this Mine Layer with a boarding shotgun deployable repeater Mine Layer. It's pretty interesting just as pure link filler. Like I said before, I'd be on top of the world if I could just take heavy rocket launcher, killer hacker, and that's my fire team. I would be so happy. But no, you need a third member to make that a Haris team because you can't do with these guys. So the Wildcat Mine Layer is fine just to tack on the end of a team if you don't want to shill out for Senor Massacre, or if you don't want to have like two hackers in your link team. That can get awkward sometimes. Dakaris is nice to sort of plug in there as well. But you can get a pure three-man team of Wildcats who, with an MSV1, are pretty good at shooting defensive camo markers, which is cool. But yeah, this one's a bit of a weird outlier. Really, I'm looking at the heavy rocket launcher and the two hackers. I'll plug my rocket launcher with my hacker of choice, and then put my little cherry on top from over here or somewhere up here, and that's a Haris team. But that is taking your Haris slot, which is kind of uncool, but that's okay. Alright, we've taken a look at the Tomcat and Carlaua. Now we get to the Hellcat. So the Hellcats are one of the most reliable drop troops in the game. Fizz 12 with a straight combat drop +3 means that unsupported, they're landing on a 15. And honestly, you're pretty happy to do that sometimes. But if you take an Evo Hacker, they're landing on an 18, or if you're in a mission like Firefight, they're more than happy to land on potentially a 21 guaranteed land. As well with Border Skirmishers, because they've got that combat drop, they can land exactly where you want them to be. So in terms of drop troops, these guys are actually extremely reliable, which isn't something you can say for a lot of drop troops, especially if your opponent has an Evo Hacker of their own. But Corregidor is very good at landing Hellcats. Trinity, the enemy Evo Hacker, put up your own assisted jump, that Hellcat's going to go down. So there's a few profiles here, but really the one I find most interesting is this Hellcat Paramedic for 23 points. Also, good to note, Super Jump Jet Propulsion, still mega good. So the Paramedic, it's a BS-12 combi rifle. It's a specialist, it's a paramedic, it can pick people up. But also, again, like the Tomcat, it has this deployable repeater. So you can treat a Hellcat kind of like a weird pitcher, where you land your Hellcat, he puts down the deployable repeater, and then great, you've got your repeater there for whatever you need it for, whether that's hacking HI or landing a missile. And then the Hellcat's, just there to go and do other Hellcat stuff. Hellcat's really great at scalping out things like camo lieutenants in the DZ. A lot of the time he can super jump up to wherever they're hiding, go for a discover on a decent number, and then kill them that way. Or else just go for a tear. And if you are just wanting to go for a tear and don't want to take a Tomcat, you can take the Hellcat with boarding shotgun, adhesive launcher rifle. As we discussed before, you can just adhesive launcher rifle an opponent's tag or ARO piece in the back and just get them stuck there. Then you've got the Spitfire as well. I'm a big fan of the Tiger Soldier Spitfire, but a Tiger Soldier this is not, especially in a faction that struggles quite a bit with Swick. You just don't have this Swick to spare for this 1.5 Swick Spitfire. And that's sort of the same with the Hellcat Hacker, who's an absolute gun in highly classified. He's a fucking monster. Hacker decharges elite troop medium infantry. He does most of the deck, but you can find it really difficult to manage having this 0.5 Swick off the table, just because of how Swick hungry the faction is. So Hellcats, if you can't quite afford Carlaua, this is where the Hellcats come in, and they do 90% of Carlaua's job, and sometimes more as well. So definitely have Hellcats on your radar when you're looking at what you're doing with your off-the-table orders. A Hellcat's really strong competition with Carlaua. So next up, we've talked a lot of game about aggressive vision control. And here it is. So this is the Intruder, Corregidor Assault Commandos, who are BS-13, MSV-2, MIM, Surprise Attack. And what these guys do is really just neg 12 your opponents out of the water. They are only 1 wound with, fine armor. And look, they are fragile. But there's very little reason why your Intruder shouldn't always be neg 12ing a target. And at that point, look, if you get crit, that's just luck. That's just part of the game. Hope you took a doctor or a speedball. But otherwise, they're very, very efficient and very deadly with what they do. And this is really kind of the return of the Intruders epoch, because they were sort of pretty good. Then they kind of got not so good as the big 5-man link team became the standard. But now they've become good again, as Sixth Sense on an ARO piece has become a lot harder to come by, where they can no longer ignore smoke shooting. And then also Combat Instinct has become a lot more rare on ARO pieces, where it's hard to ignore your surprise attack. So the usual pattern for an Intruder is you take the heavy machine gun or the multi-sniper, you throw linked smoke in front of him with a Jaguar, or maybe with McMorrow as McMorrow takes their impetuous order. Then you've got Mim neg 3, you've got surprise attack, you've got smoke, you put the neg 12 on, and then just bang, start taking heads. Now, I'm a big fan of the heavy machine gun, but I've actually recently really been coming around on the multi-sniper rifle, which is something I didn't expect to say. Now, the HMG, it's a great unit. Uh, if yeah, it's the sort of stock standard intruder to take if you're just getting started with intruders or just getting started with Infinity. I'd recommend getting started with the HMG intruder. You've got those 4 dice going down range. Uh, Nothing to complain about there. But what the multi sniper has over the heavy machine gun is it has efficiency. So this intruder HMG, to get in its optimal range, maybe it has to move, maybe it doesn't. But then looking for a secondary target, uh, you can put yourself in a neg 6 modifier a lot of the time if you're shooting at something above your range. So there's a bit of inefficiency in just having to move around and get there. But with the multi-sniper rifle, you can deploy him as your reserve in one position where he can see, as many targets as your opponent has standing. You put smoke on him, and then he can just take his time one at a time and just put down whatever's sitting in front of him, putting neg 12s, because you can outrange a lot of the time as well, putting neg 12s on whatever's standing up. And there have been, a number of times where I've played the intruder multi-sniper. I've spent 3 orders and gotten 3 kills. And it's just been as simple as that. No running around, no bullshit. But it is a bit more of a finesse piece. And you do want to, I guess, a bit of experience back in knowing that it might not work out the first few times you try it. And then also as well, you've got the threat of the ARO as well. He's a really great piece just to put down because he's got that camouflage state to put down as your reserve, holding down a line that your opponent can't really maneuver something that can discover him in a great way, and just sort of sitting there as a threat, maybe take a shot late in the turn, but again, maybe not. He could just sit there and be a huge issue. But if, say a HMG tries to engage him, it can be in a bad band, you can have that mim, you can shoot that one die out and get some results. So yeah, look, the intruder, it's a very integral part of the Corregidor game plan. Whether you're taking that HMG or whether you're taking that multi-sniper rifle, uh, he's a very heavy consideration in most Corregidor lists I'm making in N5. Alright, Senor Massacre. This guy's a bit of a goat. One of the best CC units in the game in N4, and that stayed true in N5, or it hasn't for some other models like Chimeras, etc. CC 24, Martial Arts Level 3, Natural Born. This guy's an absolute goon in close combat. He can happily take on other close combat specialists as well. And he also provides Eclipse Grenades, which again aren't aren't the most necessary tool in Corregidor, but Senor Massacre himself really appreciates having them to close the gap. It's got 2 flavors here. I'm really most drawn to the boarding shotgun +1 burst, and both have EM grenades, which is really important to note as well, and a boarding pistol. +1 burst boarding shotguns have just proven to be pretty brutal. Put him in a team, that's 3.5 dice going into your opponent at +6. And yeah, he's pretty happy to take those odds. EMCC weapon means he can brick tags and heavier units pretty easily, but unfortunately doesn't have an offhand DA in case he needs to do stuff with anti-material. But he's still a really great unit. He's got the Jaguar keyword, but I don't think that's I don't think that's relevant, basically. I don't see a benefit to putting him with Jaguars, because the Jaguar sort of does what Massacre does a little bit worse, and doesn't need the shoring up of his ability. And again, you're usually using aggressive vision control, where you don't need that Eclipse Grenade necessarily, but still a very brutal melee unit. So now we move up to the heavy infantry, and the first one to look at here is the Mobile Brigada. So these are your standard kind of heavy infantry for Corregidor. Move 6-2, BS13, Arm 5, which is a really nice standout stat, with a 360 visor. So 360 visor, it's sort of bleh. It's a new addition, but it's sort of been a bleh in Infinity as a game in general. But like I said before, these are really important lieutenant options you have available. So, looking at what you're going to pair with one of these options, you've got a heavy machine gun, which it is only BS13, but unless you're taking a tag, you're not really going to get something more reliable other than the Intruder than the Mobile Brigada HMG. You're on BS13, you've got Armor 5, 2 wounds, you've got 5 dice. Unless you're Intruder maxing or taking a tag, you don't have a more reliable weapon than that. And you can very happily make a link team of HMG Brigada, Lieutenant Tinbot multi-rifle, who covers that range band really nicely, and then a hacker to stick behind that firewall, who could be Jazz, who could be Val. They're getting that special die to chuck up a picture as well, and everyone's happy. You've also got a missile launcher, who is, again, a very reliable ARO piece, but very expensive, both in points, but honestly more in SWIC. Spending all that SWIC on an ARO piece isn't something Corregidor really wants to do, but hey, it is doable. And then you've also got the Mobile Brigada hacker, who's a Tinbot -6 hacker, just sort of chilling out on his own. With how things have changed, where the lieutenant now has a firewall option, which wasn't the case in N4, you're taking the Mobile Brigada hacker less, but it's still a really good piece. Still absolutely a really good piece. But again, very expensive. You take 2 of these guys, you're looking at upwards of 70 points, which is quite a lot. A Harris with Mobile Brigadas can easily reach 100 points if you're taking what I said, the HMG, the Lieutenant, and then something on the end. That can just be a third of your list right there. So it's big money, but they do pretty well for themselves. Then the Evaders. So these guys are really interesting, and I've got a lot of love for them, where you've got kind of specialist weapons and engineers as the sort of main flavors, where they're no wounding cap HI. So you've got a multi-rifle and a boarding shotgun profile that either has a Tinbot Neg 3 or has an engineer profile. And these guys can, power up a Cyclone or a Vostok pretty well, where you can take a boarding shotgun engineer, you can take a multi-rifle firewall with a Panzerfaust as well, stick that on the end of kind of one of these remotes to give a bonus die to. They've all got climbing plus as well, so they're happy to go run around, make some moves. That's pretty cool. But then also they've got some special weapons with the Feuerbach, who's a great little piece if you do want to take a linked gun, a linked ranged gun that's not a Wildcat or a Mobile Brigada, that really benefits from having that doctor around from the no wounding cap, and gives that firewall to a hacker in the team. So they're kind of like a mini compressed Mobile Brigada. If you don't want to take out all the points for that, you can just chuck in a Feuerbach. Or you can chuck in the AP Spitfire with the Tinbot firewall, who's also an engineer. This guy's one of my top picks in something like Highly Classified as the main gun of a link. And yet, really great piece. Otherwise, you've got the vanilla AP Spitfire, but I'm not really too drawn to that. I think I would generally rather just go the full Monty with the engineer AP Spitfire. But a very cool little unit. These guys will often kind of be the accompaniment if you take the, 2 Aguasil, 1 Aguasil Lieutenant Special. One of these guys will usually be popping off that link, but there's a lot of really creative ways to use the Evader. And I think in some ways, he's sort of the heart of Corregidor link teams, is the Evader. Alright, so we'll move on to tags now. And we'll start off with a real stinker, which is the Iguana. Second or third worst tag in the game. Lost Lieutenant did a really great episode of a tag tier list. Make sure to go check that one out after this one. But I seem to remember the Iguana being second from the bottom, and I can't help but agree. Yes, it's cheap. It's a BS-14 AP heavy machine gun, which means it can't really ARO, because it's just one save from the heavy machine gun. And it's got the dreaded escape system thing. I'm going to do a more extended video on the Iguana. With the new Iguana that's been spoiled, we know that this is changing. so I'm not really going to dwell on it. And I might do a whole video just on the iguana as well. But never take it. It's the second worst tag in the game. Beautiful model, but wait till the profile rework and then we'll get back to it. All right, next up is the gecko. And these guys are very interesting as tags, where in your mind you should treat them as like mega HI, because they don't really play like a tag at all, and don't really benefit from being a tag. They more just sort of get the drawbacks, which is a bit of a shame, but whatever. So the main draw is that they're 6 armor, 3 structure. And at the end of the day, for any unit, that's pretty impressive. But these guys are just little nuggets of pain. They've got BS attack +1 burst inbuilt, and BS attack +2 damage. So if you're taking a Mach 12, you're looking at a pass or possibility of survival free weapon, which is the lowest possibility of survival in the game, which is really cool. And then you're getting that bonus on your chain rifles as well, and on your Panzerfausts and Blitzens. So if the geckos hit, it's going to be a lot of damage. But that if is actually quite a big if, because you're only rocking BS13. So you're sort of relying on having this resiliency and just being okay if something goes wrong, kind of in the same way as the Mobile Brigada, and to a lesser extent the Evader, where you're just going to be forcing face-to-face rolls until something goes down. Now, the good thing is, you can usually clean up anything with heavy mim if you're using an Evader, or if there's any other kind of problem ARO piece, you can probably find a solution to it just by virtue of playing Corregidor, because you have so many options to engage. But these guys really excel in quadrant control or objective control missions, where you just need something fat and chunky up the board who can take some punishment. And a suppressive gecko can be really hard to shift, and if you get a special die on it, having that Panzerfaust and Blitzen to reach out with on ARO, putting 2 dice on these rifles, it's good stuff. And then, like I said before, it's got the little Robbie bot as well, who's Whip 13, which is actually quite good. A lot of the tag bots are Whip 11 or Whip 12, so having Whip 13 on the bot, it's quite nice. These tags are also guys who are usually pressing up the field anyway, so can kind of get that Robbie bot in an advanced position as well, which is really cool. So the Gecko Squadron, it used to be that the Mach 12 was only 0.5 Swick, and now it's a bit awkward where they're the same cost. I would say lean towards the multi-marksman rifle. It's PS5 AP, which is really quite nice, and has much more of a bite on the backswing. The Mach 12's a little bit better up close, and if you said, oh, I like the Mach 12 better, I'd say, yeah, whatever. But I like the Panzerfaust too. So, they're units you're not going to take every time, sort of like the Sombra, but they really do excel in some missions and are a lot of fun to play with, so I like the Geckos. Now the Gator. Here is a tag. Move 6'4", CC20, BS14. So we've got the BS14 tag. Well, I guess the Iguana's there too, but fuck him. The Gator's a really, really good tag. CC20, BS14. He's got ECM Hacker -3 on board, which is really nice. CC attack -6 with an EMCC weapon. Now, this isn't the kind of CC where you're going to run off and go stab somebody. This is the kind of CC that makes it a big coin flip when your opponent wants to come in and try and stab the Gator. One of the best ways to disable a tag is to get a melee specialist in there and just start hacking away. But the Gator is making that hopefully somewhere around a coin flip. You're probably going to be swinging a 17. They'll hopefully be swinging a 20. That's coin flip territory, which is where you want to be. Dodge +2 inches. And this is where I said that the Gator really likes having that tag comm around to get that dodge up to a 14. Because it can actually dodge a pretty decent way, which is nice if it's hanging out on ARO. And it's also your last NCO. which, like I said, you don't really have competition for that lieutenant order. So if you're taking the Gator, most of the time he's going to have three orders to himself, which is the TAC-aware, the NCO, and his own orders. So he doesn't take a whole lot of powering past that. He's the perfect Group 2 tag, just to power out and get some work done there. And he's got some great weapons as well. Multi-heavy machine gun means he can take a bit of an aero duty. Maybe get into a fight, then slink away. Chain rifle +1 burst is nice, but the mine dispenser is huge money. Huge, huge money. You can set up a lot of, very powerful forks with the mine dispenser, or if your opponent's just null deployed, you can just spend time spraying mines everywhere. You're getting an automatic reload from baggage as well, which is really cool. And there have been some games, even before the baggage change, where I would just activate Gator, shoot mines, reload, shoot mines, reload, shoot mines, reload, shoot mines. And that was the combat group's orders done, because I didn't have anything else I needed to do with him. So yeah, he's a great little unit, made even better now. I think he's really benefited from having this guy who can run around as well. Because what can happen is you can put down the Robbie bot. First short skill, move, so Robbie bot moves. Second short skill, shoot mines. So while you're shooting mines, you're also moving up a specialist. There's a lot of very cool play with the Gator. The sad thing is, the faction supports him okay. It is sort of the question of, if you want to play tags, go play vanilla. Because I don't know, I don't want to get into that. But hey, you're playing Corregidor anyway, so you're here for the pain. Alright, the Stemplar's on. Pretty stock standard. Corregidor can't link him. Corregidor doesn't really care about him. Yeah. Reactions ons. Having the Thunderbolt's really nice. You will also sometimes take the HMG. You do fall into that category of people who still take the HMG, because quite a lot of the time you will run an Evo hacker in Corregidor, because you do want to get those Hellcats down. And some of your more reliable gunfighters with kind of the higher stats are your remotes, and you do support your remotes very well. So you're sometimes happy to take the heavy machine gun, just because it's got climbing plus, so it's a bit more maneuverable than a lot of the other TR bots. So you can put marksmanship on it. It can climbing plus off of the building it's on, climbing plus up to a firing position, and then just be 4 dice on 14s, which is better than most of your other guns, unless you're taking a tag, or if the intruder's not the right guy for the job, or if you just haven't taken one. So Thunderbolt's great. You will also sometimes take the HMG just because you run a lot of Evo hackers. So if you see your local Corregidor player playing with the HMG reactions on, don't nail him to a cross. Give him a kiss on the cheek, because he could probably use some warmth in his life. Vertigo's on. Does Vertigo's on things? Yeah, you'll take one. Transductors, you've got the 2 AVA. You'll take them sometimes. Again, you're a faction that's pretty cheap to begin with, so they're not something you necessarily see in every list, like you might in, say, like MO, where you really, really need your 7-point flashbots. That's not the case with Corregidor. So you'll sometimes see them, sometimes not. Now, I really consider Corregidor the home of the Cyclone, and really what you're looking at is the X-Visor Feuerbach with pictures. So with this, you can shoot pictures, up to 32 inches, just 2 dice on a 12, which is absolutely fantastic. Or you can shoot even further than that and just accept like the 2 dice on 9s, which like isn't that bad. These guys are absolute goats, and the reason they slot really well into Corregidor is because you've got quite good linked engineers, and quite good links that can support the Cyclone as well with climbing plus, to be quite maneuverable. I wouldn't call you crazy taking the Spitfire. You can get some really interesting angles with the Spitfire. Scuttling up the board, kind of catching one of those mid lines, kind of those like midfield diagonal lines into a very juicy spot. But really, the Feuerbach's quite good. As I said, you're running Evo hackers. Suddenly, this Cyclone is shooting on BS-15 with a Feuerbach. Really nice. And also, if you don't have that Evo Hacker, or if you're coming up against an MSV arrow piece, it's got a repeater on board. You just slap white noise on top of it, shoot an MSV piece, or marksmanship piece off the board is really nice as well. So the Cyclones, they've got a great home in Corregidor. And generally, if you want to play remotes in Nomads, I would say actually come down to Corregidor because they support them quite well. All right, Lunicods. These guys are really, really cool. I wouldn't take more than one, I don't think. But these guys bring 4 deployment +4 with a Mind Laid Crazy Koala and a repeater, kind of as a second layer of defense before your DZ gets hit. But they've got really interesting loadouts. Heavy shotgun, heavy flamethrower if you want to be leaning to, just because having that template's really nice. But a Thunderbolt's here as well, and an emitter, which is pretty wacky. If you've got an Evo Hacker, you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel for something to make a play. You can just chuck marksmanship on this emitter, see what happens. But where these guys really excel is almost kind of like sleeper agents in a way. There are a lot of times where they'll just sit there and not do anything, provide some nice utility, provide some nice defensive equity. But with move 8, 2, and climbing plus, heavy shotgun, crazy koala, flamethrower, there are some times where you just flick the switch on them and they just go. They move 8 inches up, they put down a crazy koala, they move another 8 inches, they shotgun something in the face, the crazy koala goes off. It's a nightmare. So the Lunicods, really, really cool units. I'm really glad to see how much they've changed from N4 to N5. I think they've gotten exactly what they needed. They are a bit on the expensive side, hence I'd only ever really take one. But if you can maximize the Lunicod, it's worth every penny. Like I said before, Soviet zones, you do want baggage in Corregidor quite badly. A lot of your ARO relies on disposable weapons, and you're taking a lot of pictures. If you're taking that Gator, you really want to be reloading that mine dispenser. But yeah, usually you want to take the Evo Hacker, double up with that Evo Hacker with the baggage, fits really, really well into the faction. You're playing with an Evo Hacker a fair amount of the time in Corregidor, I'd say. And then your last battle bot's the Vostok. You can basically pretend this one doesn't exist, which kind of sucks, to be honest, but that's okay. So the Vostok, it's a BS12 Mimneg 6 Mach 12, where you put marksmanship on it, suddenly it's BS15 with Mimneg 6. If you put it in a fire team, which you should, it just absolutely spits. And it's the case where it's hitting on such high numbers and your opponent's hitting on such low numbers. Actually, you're getting most of these bullets through, and they're gonna hurt. So the Vostok, you can, like I said before, you can stick it with a couple of evaders. You can stick it with a couple of Wildcats if you're feeling strange. You can stick it with a specialist Lobo and a Diablo is a really great team to get it moving as well. But the Vostok, it's a great piece. And if you've got it backed up by an intruder, there's nothing more annoying than a marksmanship Vostok on suppressive. Just a nightmare of a piece to deal with. Having the true 2 structure as well is really nice, and remote presence. It's going to be very unlikely this guy's ever going to get blown straight off the board. So yeah, absolute legend. Now, the Corregidor Bandit is sort of the new kid on the block in the sense that it's been kind of vaguely maligned for a really long time, even back when I was playing, just because it was an irregular order that was sort of taking up one of your irregular / off the board slots, only being kind of a whip 12 weird mix of skills. And I think that's still the case. But what they got very, very recently was Infiltration Reroll. With Fizz 13, you're taking an infiltration roll, over infiltration roll on a 10. You're rolling that twice, you got a 75% chance to land wherever you want. Past that, your BS12 Mimneg 3 with BS attack +1 burst and martial arts 2 with a good melee weapon. And then, pretty decent guns for the weapon, for the range you're fighting at, and +1 burst templates. So these guys are sort of fidets in a way, but they are taking up that one of those slots of off-the-table orders or irregulars. Really, the only one I'd be looking at is the Mine Layer, who has the deployable repeater and shock mine with submachine gun. And submachine gun is weirdly kind of the best gun out of the lot, just because you're shooting 4 true submachine gun shots. And look, only being PS7 with the light shotgun and the subgun can catch you out. But this can mean you can literally start with a deployable repeater, as your reserve drop, you put it down right on the unit you want to nuke, and then you can just go for it. Otherwise, having the shock mine as the backup really is quite valuable. If you're playing against something like Ariadna or Hak Islam, where you might not necessarily have anything you want to hack, being able to put a shock mine right outside their DZ can be really annoying. And then, yeah, you can go in, you can make some havoc, have some fun, and call it a day. The bandits are really good. I would steer away from these other ones just because I don't think they quite hit. I don't think they quite reach the territory of taking up one of your irregular or off the board slots. Uh, Only being whip 12, the 2 hackers are pretty meh. And I think if you're trying to, killer hack something, there are probably better ways to do it in terms of getting some kind of hacking presence there. Yeah, then the FO and the vanilla are just sort of weird pieces I'm not sure what to do with. But the mine layer is really good. Have a spin with him is really, really quite good. But the competition is fierce in terms of, these slots here. This bandit mine layer could be a Hellcat deployable repeater, for example. Costing you less and not taking Swick. It's an interesting quandary. But I like the bandit mine layer quite a lot. From the games I've had with him, he's always done a huge amount of work. Maybe not quite magical Christmas land work, but pretty big work. Then we've got the Moran, the long-awaited Moran. You're really only ever taking these repeater profiles, where you've got the boarding shotgun, flash pulse +1 burst, crazy koala as your workhorse. And again, these guys are your infiltrator, forward observer, mine layers. So they themselves are a repeater. So if your opponent comes and tries to, cross the Delaware, as it were, they're probably going to get hacked if you've got your Moran in a nice spot with that infiltration. Then BS12 with Mimneg 3 and a shotgun. If your opponent does decide to engage them, just with guns, they can occasionally just get a high roll, your opponent not really pepper anything around that, and blow something's head off in reactive. And then on active, they're not bad either. Having stealthy repeaters is also really good as well. If it's your turn, Moran literally can just walk up to something to get it in repeater range, and then have someone else zap them or brick them or whatever else. Then, say it's a HI, you walk up, Jazz bricks him, you come around the corner with the boarding shotgun, goodbye. Now, there is a use case for the combi rifle Morans, and that's if there's an exclusion zone. I think if there's an exclusion zone, being BS12, Mimneg 3, combi rifles with crazy quality setup forks are actually quite serviceable. And I've had some really great hero runs from Moran combi rifles before. These surprise attack camo ones, just, you lose so much from not having the Moran repeaters. And really, from how Corregidor feels to play, it feels like the whole faction is built around the assumption that you're taking 2 Moran repeaters, so just stay away from these ones. Alright, now on to the Jaguars. So these guys are pretty interesting, almost as an alternate line troop, where they're costing, 10, 11 points, about the same cost of your Aguasiles, but do something very different. So these guys are BS12, Fizz 13, Dogged Frenzy MA1 with CC 22. So they're very happy to punch someone who has no idea what they're doing in close combat with good weapons. DA and EMCCW, great weapons, even if only PS7. So you're really only looking at 2 profiles here. You're looking at the chain rifle smoke grenade, which is your cheapest profile. And then you're looking at the adhesive launcher rifle Panzerfaust smoke grenade. The light shotgun used to be a very popular pick. just with how, the old shotgun fork worked. Now, not so much. I mean, they're fine. You can still take one. No one's going to yell at you or anything. Uh, but the adhesive launcher rifle Panzerfaust, really nice piece because you can do a couple things with it. The first one is you just chuck a chain rifle and adhesive launcher Jaguar together as a cheap duo. The Panzerfaust Jaguar just plays a very cheap defensive role. I mean, yes, it's only BS11, but there's a couple big positives with the Jaguar. The first one is it's extremely cheap. It's 10 points, so like who gives a fuck? The second one is dogged. Your opponent can do some damage to a Jaguar, but it's still going to soak, hopefully minimum 2 orders if they don't just fly off the table. And then the third one is the Jaguars, once they're within 32, they can comfortably engage at any range. Has your opponent gotten too close for the Panzerfaust? Great, just start hitting him with the adhesive launcher rifle. Have they gotten too close for that? Great, just hit him with a Cobra pistol. And if someone like, maybe an extreme example, but a Swiss guard rolls around, if you're linked, they can still just throw smoke at their feet. What I used to really enjoy doing, it's a bit of a meme, but what I used to really enjoy doing was baiting my opponent to shoot my Jaguar, get him to throw smoke in a non-face-to-face way to cover my intruder, and then have smoke shooting arrows on my opponent's turn, which is pretty crazy. Probably more of a meme than a dream, but you can do it, and it's hilarious. But yeah, these guys are very important uh, as your alternate line troop, where you can kind of get these wild cards and build them off of Jaguars just to get that link smoke, to get that close combat. One thing I'm finding really good in terms of a core is taking 3 Jaguar adhesive launcher smoke grenades, Panzerfausts, one just regular smoke grenade, and then that's pushing all those Jaguars up to BS12, and they can be really annoying just with that extra point of BS. It also makes them be rolling 14s if they're throwing smoke grenades at their feet, which is really good. And then they can also do some really nasty coordinated order shenanigans as well, where you can just go, okay, coordinated order, you 3 Panzerfaust, stand up, have a go. And then you've got that team of 4. You can stick someone like Jazz or Valyria on the end of that. They're throwing pitchers with +1 BS, which is always nice, and it's not a bad team at all. Especially if you're taking other very expensive elements in your list. Like let's say you're taking a Gator, having this kind of Jaguar core as a defensive backbone and order battery is really good. Last up, McMurrow. He's an absolute murderer, and he's making it into most Corregidor lists as well. He's one of the reasons to play Corregidor, I think, along with Carlaua. And he's a 2-wound, immune arm 4 beast. Move 6-4 with super jump means he's jumping 8 inches, then moving 4. So he's moving 12 inches a turn. He can berserk 10 inches with CC23 martial arts 2 and a PS3 APDACC weapon, which is absolutely brutal. Smoke grenades are fantastic. Like I said, he can impetuous forward, set up some smoke for an intruder. And then regular grenades, on a Fizz 16, he can spec fire those on a 10, which is incredible. Or he can come around the corner and present a really nice fork with that +1 burst chain rifle, where they're either having to dodge those 2 chain rifles or try and dodge against a grenade being thrown on a 19, which is incredible. It's hard to say how many games I've won with McMorrow just after putting enough heads down and running in with him, or after, the opponent's just null deployed in the first place, and he's been able to clean house. If he's also just hanging out in some nook in the midfield, that can be a big pain as well. So yeah, look, McMorrow, he's a great little unit. Love him very, very dearly. Now, this is the time in the video where I would usually show you an example list, but I thought it might be fun to do something different and actually just build a list live with you guys on air. So when I'm starting a Corregidor list, I'm always starting with these 2 Moraines. I'm always starting with Jazz and Billet, and then I'm usually also starting with McMorrow as well. So we might make 2 lists together, and the first one might just be just generic good stuff Corregidor. So let's grab an intruder as well. Da, da, da. Nice. So here's what we've got to start with. We've got Jazz and Billy as our hacking backbone with the Hacking Device Plus and Trinity. We've got the two Moraines forming that defensive backbone with the repeaters and the mine layers, and a little bit of specialist allotment as well. We've got McMurrow as our first kind of slot taker here in kind of alternative style of engagement. And we've got an intruder who's shooting through that smoke that McMurrow's setting up. So if we're taking the blueprint for a Corregidor list, we're missing a couple more things. The first one is we need a gun to shoot through white noise, but that can like literally be anything. That could be a Jaguar Panzerfaust duo. But we are missing our second slot for what we want to do in terms of an off the table or a regular order. So what we could do is we could take a bandit, for example, or we could take something like a Hellcat. And if we take the Hellcat, that pushes us more into the direction of taking an Evo hacker as well. So how about this? What we'll do is we'll kind of go this direction, taking the Evo hacker and see where we end up. So we'll take the deployable repeater combi rifle, and now I want a second hacker as well. So let's grab Valyria, just because she should always be your second port of call when it comes to a hacker, unless you're taking a Wildcat. Now, we might actually take a Wildcat. The reason being, if we decide, hey, we are taking that Evo hacker, we'll probably end up taking a Cyclone, and we don't need to take Valyria as a second pitcher. So why don't we grab that Evo hacker? Where are we? Oh, here we go. Let's take that Evo hacker, and let's take the Cyclone. All right, so we're taking the Cyclone. This means I want to take a Wildcat regular hacker just to form, that, just to have that combat instinct hacker is really nice. But you can see already, we are basically out of swig. So we're going to have to be very careful from now on. So we've got a Cyclone. The Cyclone can link with the Wildcat. But now we're in an awkward position where we have to start thinking about Lieutenant as well. So what we could do for now, we could honestly take the Wildcat Lieutenant and spit in the face of everything I've been telling you this entire time. But hey, that might just be where we end up. For now, we might take a cheeky Aguasil Lieutenant. Alright, so we're starting to spread groups now. And what I generally like to do is I like to put the Intruder as a group 2 piece, because he is just that efficient. And we'll move Jazz down here as well. So this means that, however we get a pitcher down, we've got hacking in the other group, which is really nice. So let's say the Cyclone gets that pitcher down, and we don't want to use more group 1 orders. We can use that group 2 to make that happen instead. Alright, so we've taken a Cyclone. That means we're going to want an engineer somewhere. So one thing we could do is veer back here, pick up a Wildcat engineer, and get that bonus that way. But what we might do instead, let's grab a Clockmaker. So we'll grab a Clockmaker to service the Cyclone, and let's get him a Zond bot, and let's go grab a reaction Zond. So this might be a situation where I might take the HMG because we've got that Evo hacker, and we've got an engineer. I might lean towards this HMG here, but we would have to drop the Aguasil Lieutenant. So we could just do that and see what that looks like and have a bit of fun there. Go back to here, just grab the stupid Wildcat. Blah. Alright, so now group 2, this is what that would sort of look like. I don't like that though, because I also do like the range bands on the Thunderbolt. So we're going to grab these idiots back, chuck them back in, and that's our core team dealt with. And we'll go back to the reaction Zond. Where are you, buddy? And pick this one up. So we've got 9 units here. We've got 5 units down here, so we've got room for one more, and about 30 points left. But what we could do as well, we could get rid of Jazz, just take Jazz FTO. Then we've got a little bit more to play with. So one thing we could do here is get the adhesive launcher smoke grenade and make that a Haris team, and that's pretty nice. But then we've still got this amount of points left. So what we could do, bloop, get Jazz back. Still got a slot left and about 30 points. So 30 points is a bit of an odd slot for Corregidor in terms of what you can get, because it's just not enough to pick up a Sombra, which is sort of annoying. And we've got our Hellcat, we've got our Moran, so we don't want to really use anything else there either. So let's see if there's another robot we can pick up. 40 points is about 9 points over. What we could do is we could get rid of the reaction Zond, take a Vostok, and then we could take a Jaguar duo. So grab Jazz, drop her down, and then go back to here and take a little duo of Jags. Oop. And we're out of money. Probably should have seen that coming. That's okay. But you can sort of see how the process is looking through here. We could get rid of the Zond bot if we really wanted to make something like this work, or some other way. But this is sort of a vague example of what a generic good stuff Corregidor list might look like. I have to fiddle with the points a bit more, and I'll sort of make up some generic lists as well. But let's get rid of all of this, and let's try making a tag list. So let's grab the Gator to start off with, and we're still going to grab those 2 Morans, boop, boop, and Jazz and Billy. So with a tag list, we don't really have to worry about offensive stuff. We don't necessarily need to take the Intruder, because the chances are the Gator's going to mop up well enough for us anyway. So let's grab Jazz and Billy, and this is what this team's going to look like here. So I am worried about kind of pitchers, so we are going to grab Valyria. Why did you go there? And let's set up that Jaguar core I was talking about. 3 of these bad boys, and 1 of those, and we can have Valyria backed with these Jags, which is pretty cool. So we've already spent about 200 points, and we've got our Gator, we've got our 10 orders. So what else do we need to make this list work? Well, we haven't used our allotment yet for off the board. We'll grab McMorrow, because I love him. And I'm not sure what to do at this stage, whether we go Hellcat or Tomcat, etc. We'll move this Gator down to Group 2. Like I said, he's a great little Group 2 guy. And we could even just chuck this Jaguar core down in Group 2 as well. So that's the Gator, and the Gator's group set up pretty well. But we're going to need some kind of engineering team to support that. So what we could do, and we're going to need some kind of close assault, but we've got McMorrow there. So let's think, what could we do? What we could do, how many points do we have left? Ugh, probably not enough for that. I was thinking of Vostok maybe backed up by some evaders would be pretty cool. But I still think an evader could have a role here somewhere. Or we just go back to the classic clockmaker. Hard to say. For now, let's grab a Tomcat. Let's grab a cheap Tomcat engineer. And we'll pop him, great, into Group 1. So let's have a think. We've got our hacking. We've got our hacking. We've got our tag. We've got sort of a defensive mix here. We've got our close assault. We sort of have an engineer. Now, what No, we don't have... Oh, we've got some Swick as well. So what we could do, we could take this in a guided direction as well. So let's grab a cheeky lad there. But we don't have a lieutenant. Which sucks. So let's just do the easy peasy. Grab a couple of these fine fellows. And you can see we have maxed our slots, which isn't great. And Val has just... Oh, there's Val. There you go. So what we'll do is we'll axe Jazz from the lineup. Just grab that Jazz FTO, just because we need it. And I don't like being in a position where these Aguasils are just like vaguely hanging around. That's uncool to me. So we could just grab Lupe. And she fits in decently well with these Aguasils just as the LT. And then could upgrade this Tomcat into the mean Tomcat, or we could drop this Tomcat entirely. Actually, no, we could axe Lupe. Jazz joins these two Aguasils purely to get pictures on her junk. And then we've got about 27 points left. And yeah, like I said before, that's where it gets sort of awkward in terms of points. It's not quite enough for enough for Carlaua either is the awkward thing. So I think what we do is we just go back to Tomcat Town, and we could grab one of these more expensive Tomcats. So we or it is probably worthwhile getting it dedicated. No, that's lame. We're going to be cool. So we'll grab the Tomcat Engineer, who has that beefed up Zondcat, who can come on and support the Gator if we need it. It's important to recognize as well that the Gator's, it's not a tag with remote presence, so we can't heal its wounds. And if it gets any mean states, we can just use a Speedball to get rid of that as well. So that's not absolutely fatal to the Gator. What have we got here? We've got about 23 points left over. And that is an awkward little number. How do I want to do with that? You know what? For the sake of all of your time at home, we might just sort of block this one off here. What? Can't afford a Lunicod. Let's grab a Lunicod. We'll take you. We'll drop you down to an engineer, and save all of you guys at home some time. So we'll call that a tag list as a bit of fun. So we've got the tag kind of backed up by this cheap Jaguar core that's allowing us kind of the equity to take this tag. We've got this little Haris team here just to give pictures to Jazz. Got our Moraines, got our close assault, got our missile launcher, Lunicod, and our Tomcat to getting close. So I'll put some lists just to not be so random and on the spot in just a moment. So I hope you enjoyed a bit of that thought process, but here we've got some actual Corregidor lists that have been put in the oven and actually tested. So this is kind of going back to that generically good idea, where we're taking McMorrow as the heavy close assault, taking that Jaguar core, this time tipped with Jazz, just to, get her those extra pictures. And we didn't quite have enough for the full 3 Panzerfaust smoke grenades, but we've got 2, which is pretty cool. Then we've got a little Haris team I discussed in the video, which is Brigada HMG, Brigada Lieutenant Multi-Rifle Tinbot, and then Valyria, as kind of an expeditionary team. Now, you could put Jazz and kind of switch Jazz and Valyria here if you wanted, but my rationale is this team is much more likely to leave the deployment zone, and Val is much more likely to get, like, her brain blown off in the midfield, and we don't want that to happen to Jazz. Sure, someone could pitch her way down to try and zap us, but, we can make that difficult with our deployment. Then Group 2, we've got the Intruder Multi-Sniper just as a very efficient shooter who can get a lot done with not a lot of orders. Same with the Morans. They usually start on an objective, so they don't need the orders to get there. And if you've got spare orders in this group, they're happy just to shit out another crazy koala. That's no problem. A Sulyat just to be there as the baggage, restocking Jazz's pitchers, the Jaguars, Panzerfausts, Valyria's pitchers. We've got a Stemplers on just as a bit of point filler. With Takaway, they're not bad. And then that Bandit filling out our second slot. So the pattern for this will be, if we're going first, McMurrow goes forward with his Impetuous, sets up smoke, then Group 2 is Intruder, just shoots as many people as he can, and with the leftover orders, our Bandit goes in and just tries to be as much trouble as possible. So that's a bit of a fun list, shows you the different ways Corregidor can engage, which is a lot of fun. But then we kind of go over here, kind of in a line of what we were looking at with our first list. So you can see we're taking the Hellcat Paramedic with the deployable repeater. And of course, we've got the Evo Hacker to back that up down here. We've got our Tomcat with deployable repeater as well. So really, there's no way our opponent's going to stop us from getting a repeater where we want it. If the Hellcat fails and burns out, Tomcat goes in or vice versa. Then we've got a little three-man team here of a Cyclone Feuerbach chain rifle pitcher with that little Aguasil duo thing. So we've got our first little Haris team just to buff up the Cyclone. Got a Reaction Zond chilling on its own with that Thunderbolt, who can be marksmanship as well in a really tight spot. And then we've got a Vostok with two Wildcat hackers. Now, as we discussed, the Wildcat hacker, it's going to have that sixth sense to make sure nothing slips past us with those midfield Morans. The awkward thing is, and also, again, they're quite good defensive hackers, just because they've got that BTS 6. The awkward thing is, it is two hackers in the link, so there might be a point in the game where one of them has to break that link and go out. But if it does, the remaining Wildcat will number 2 and kind of continue as a duo with the Vostok. So it's not absolutely back-breaking as it could be with other units. And that's our second little Haris slot taken up. We've taken up our quote-unquote core and our Haris here. Group 2 is looking more to support rather than damage, like this group was, where we've got the two Morans as always, the Evo Hacker to kind of bounce around this controlled jump, or bounce around a marksmanship as need be. We've got a Clockmaker with an armed turret, and I do still like armed turrets even though they've been nerfed. I think you can use them smartly. If you've got some points left over in the list like I did, it's a fine little upgrade. Just because they got a little fucked doesn't mean nothing. Vertigo Missile Launcher. We've got this great little network for getting repeaters where we want them. And the Wildcat Hacker being in this team means as well, it's very efficient to be spotlighting, because you're moving up a whole team as you're spotlighting. And then we've got Jazz just in the group for that white noise, and also just to make sure that, you know, if Group 1 doesn't want to spend the time hacking, Group 2 has the equity to do that with. So, I hope you all enjoyed this video very much. As our first faction focus, we're veering away from the initial reaction style of video into hopefully this deeper look with a bit more expertise, well, quote-unquote expertise, behind it than the initial reaction stuff was. Let me know what you think about this new style of doing things, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.